we are here with Sue Marshall. She is the CEO and founder of NetZRO, which is a really cool upcycling food movement in Minnesota. So today we'll just catch up. Some of you that were at the preservation celebration last year got a chance to hear a presentation from Lynn, who was also working there at the time. So we'll do a little recap of the things that she talked about, and then we'll dive in with some more questions so that you who are not familiar with everything that NetZRO does will familiarize yourself and also know how to get involved. So, Sue, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Sue Marshall, CEO and founder of NetZRO. And NetZRO is a proprietary platform to connect people that have food waste, that would be beverage and food manufacturers, like food and need really interesting ingredients. And so we are an upcycler, so which means we take that byproduct and upcycle it into great, nutritious, fun ingredients that then go into those foods for the food producers. So it's been a long journey. I started it in January of 2015. So we had the technology design built for us, and we went into a couple different byproduct streams. Our first one was actually Iowa with eggshell waste. So that is really what we started with. And we're still working with, because there's a long runway with making eggshell waste something we should eat, right?
Yeah.
We know there's calcium and collagen in an eggshell, which is what we're working on. And it's going to be great once we commercialize it. Believe me, a lot of fun. And then from there, we got into spent grain, which has only been 2 years in doing this, and we're having a lot of fun with getting those artisan grains that the breweries and distilleries work with back into the food supply chain to all of us to enjoy.
I think that is so crazy and innovative to think at how you can use something that most people just toss. Or I was reading a little bit, and you had mentioned how part of your journey is there were distilleries and breweries that were already trying to do sustainable things by providing their spent grain to be animal feed, but they just provided too much for the farms that they were connected with. So there's still kinks in that system. So you guys took a system that involved people that wanted to do something more sustainable, and you were able to create a new way to actually make it work and invite other people in on it.
Yeah, and that really is the NetZRO platform. Sometimes people think, oh, that's just a cool piece of equipment that looks like a rocket, which is great, but that's just one slice of it. You know, you have to process it safely, and that occurs. But it's really connecting the problem where the problem exists and with the opportunity. And there's all kinds of things in there that have to happen to commercialize it, to make it viable for a wide audience, number one. And most important, number two, to make an impact from a food waste side. You know, if you look at food waste, you hear the numbers, 40 billion pounds a year in the United States just goes to waste. Like you said, just, oh, well, we'll just throw it away. And people are starving and, you know, are malnourished, right? And you look at of the 40 billion, 6 billion comes from food manufacturing and beverage manufacturing. And this food is still good, you know, so I'm going to go there. That's what I said to myself. I'm going to stick to the 6 billion, still a big number. But if I can feed more people better and help Mother Nature without having to grow more food for protein and fibers and that type of thing, I think we can make a difference. 6 billion pounds.
I totally agree. And just with what we know about landfills and putting food in them and how it never breaks down, and it's all this food that we could even be composting, but you're looking at these things like even banana peels as being useful. And I think that that's amazing. So how did you get into this whole realm of preservation?
Okay, so we're going to get down and dirty. When I started, I went back to school, and I really wanted to focus on the environment and land. I was fascinated with land. I come from farming families, so I was missing that. But then driving around Iowa and seeing land, right? And like, what are people doing and why? You know, you start to really think all throughout the Midwest, really. And I looked at like what they were doing with food and land applying it, just putting it out there. And I didn't get it. So I started studying anaerobic digestion, commercial composting. And I thought, well, those are great solutions for certain aspects, but clearly there's something else. And at the same time, I had run into a friend of mine who had this technology that I currently use, was using it on cattle, manure, hogs, and then human waste.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it was poop. And I was fascinated with what it did. So it kills pathogens, dries it to 90% dry instantly, right?
Wow.
Large volumes, because there is a large volume of that going on in those sectors. And I said, wow, we should do that with food waste. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into at that point in time, right? Like, okay, let's just try it. So he had a little lab unit built for me, and we would just put food in there, and it really worked for most things. We tried sugar beets. We tried. I went to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Went down that one road where all those manufacturers are, Heinz
Yeah.
and all these people. And I tried everything. It just gave me buckets, you know. And we made like mixed food waste, like from the Heinz soup, and like dehydrated, and it turned out like granola. It looked like granola. You could eat it. Wow, that's actually pretty good. So then we started realizing, okay, we can't do it all. What really is the technology good at? Which is why we landed on the eggshells, because it literally separates that collagen off, which is the membrane, that sticky stuff on a hard-boiled egg,
Yep.
which is literally valuable to human life, right? So we're like, wow, that worked really well. So let's stick with that, which is collagen and calcium, right? Great stuff for humans and animals and everything. So, but the problem with it, Marissa, is when you're going to a plant, whether it's a breaking plant for eggs or Heinz soup, it's not a little bit, it's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Even in breweries with spent grain, we're talking tons a week, if not a day,
Wow.
right? And so they don't want you to take a part of their problem away. They're like, you gotta take it all. Well, how do you say yes to 10 tons a day of something?
Yeah.
That's a big deal. And I don't want to take it, process it, and still waste it.
Yep.
You have to really find the demand, find the market. And that's what the platform does. It's not just the big rocket, it's also connecting the dots to make sure it's zero waste and that everything gets more value, right, out
Yep.
of it. So we take it very strategically, because we look at the demand. We know the supply, we know it's large, and then the demand, and how do we ease into it realistically and create the market. So eggshell waste is a little more complicated, longer runway, more complicated. Spent grain, well, people drink beer, love to drink craft beer, right? And they say, okay, yeah, there should be grain. Yeah, there's grain left. The grain has the sugars removed for brewing or distilling. What's left is protein and fiber and the taste, which we know when we drink a craft beer why we like it tastes great. Well, that comes from the grain. So, we know those kinds of grains they use are wonderful, and they still are after. It's just less carb, which great, good for us.
Yeah.
um, so that's what you look at is, how hard is that volume going to be, and then who's going to buy it at the end? What are the uses? And so I've been working the past year, really looking at the market demand, creating partnerships with food producers. I have one company this last week just started making taproom snacks, covered peanuts with our Twin Cities Spent Grain Co-op grain.
Nice.
So that can be put into breweries, right? So all of a sudden people are getting creative, whether it's pizza crusts or pretzels, or they're all looking at, I could do an upcycled pretzel. I already do a pretzel. Why can't I do an upcycled pretzel?
That's
And
so
so
cool.
it's been a lot of fun.
And right now, currently, your only product for the consumer single household is a spent grain flour, correct?
Yeah, so we decided we don't want to be a CPG company, like
Okay.
product goods. We want to supply those people. But then COVID hit. Oh, COVID hit. It hit everybody. Nobody got away with it, trying, pivoting or doing something, right?
Yeah.
So I had a brand new, beautiful rocket shipped to a Tattersall distilling, and 2 weeks before Governor Walz said we're going home. And so it never got turned on. But what I had done prior to that is a lot of testing up in our lab. We had literally hundreds of pounds of spent grain flour,
Yeah.
rye flour, corn flour, wheat flour, barley flour. And I was just doing that for, like samples of, get people used to it. The cooks, the chefs, the bakeries, all had been getting samples. And here COVID hits and I have all this flour. Right? And none of us knew flour would be hard to get in the stores.
Yep.
It's like shocking, right? Like, wow, okay. So I got calls really fast saying, you can't get flour. You got flour, right? And I'm like, yeah, I do. What do you mean you can't get flour? I didn't realize it either. And they're like, well, you should sell it, or you should at least distribute it to the community because you have it. Yeah, great. It's a pivot, I guess. It all happened so quick. So I partnered with a local miller, and they promised me, they said, however much organic flour you need to mix with your spent grain flour, count on us.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, so it was wonderful because you can't just use 100% spent grain because it doesn't have sugar in it, but you can mix it, right? So we created 3 mixes. We created a wheat mix that anyone can use. It has 20% spent grain in it. It's lovely. It's great. You can put it in any recipe. We did the rye, again, 20% rye spent grain, 80% organic wheat. And so you could make anything. And a lot of people aren't familiar with rye. And what happened is people got familiar with rye. Rye is beautiful, really. So that was fun. And then the other one is the corn. So we did a corn 80-20 mix and cornbreads, tortillas, And again, everyone was at home baking. So we did lots of contests. We did influencers, put it on their videos and got it out across the country. I had no idea this was going to happen. So people around the country, even the world, were like, "Oh my God, I saw such and such, video and making rye bread. Can I have some of that?" And I was like, "Oh man, oh man, what did I do?" So it was great. And what I learned is being close to the consumer who's using it to understand what worked, what didn't work, what they would pay, and how much they needed to do what they wanted to do at home.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, we'll keep those mixes out there just so people can. It's education, it's awareness, and it did do the trick because then all of a sudden bakers and bigger companies were like, wait a minute, we want to do that. You're like, yeah, you actually do.
And with the output that you will be putting out, you really need to be connected with some of these bigger companies, correct?
Yeah, it's a lot of spent grain. So your average craft brewery will have about 3,000 pounds a week.
Oh my.
Of spent grain. Now that's with water, so we get it down to half of that, right? But still, that's 1,000, 1,500 pounds a week from a craft brewery of good grain that needs to go somewhere. So you have to really look at, and that's a small, if you look at the big breweries, they can have 10 tons a day.
That's amazing.
And so you have to look at, okay, what should go to human consumption, highest grade artisan grains going to the bakers, right? And then what can we do with the middle grade, General Mills, all those folks, which I've worked with, been gracious and giving me some of their science folks and helping out.
That's awesome.
And can we make cereals? Can we get this to those in need, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that has to happen when you're talking those kind of volumes.
Yep.
So that's a great initiative. And then, of course, there's still animals to feed. I didn't want to go into this excluding the farmers who are using it from breweries. So I'm now working on a pilot test with the farmers to say, how would it be better for you? What would it come in? What kind of bags? If you eventually, can pay for it, what would you pay? During the winter with spent grain, they're not picking it up at the breweries because it freezes and then they can't use it.
That makes sense.
And it's shelf stable for maybe 48 hours. So they can't just stick it outside and then it rots. It's highly microbial. So it's not a product that, they can just store somewhere. But when we process it, it's shelf stable for pretty much ever, it's dried. So they like it that way. So we're working on how to make sure they still get access to it.
That's amazing. And I think one thing that also captivated me as well is that you also try to work with other sustainable groups. So Tattersall Distilling is very focused on sustainability. And I was on their website looking at where they get their grain from. And it's
Yeah.
so localized, which is amazing because they have a heart for growing as organically as possible and just really picking their grain from high quality sources. So you're kind of completing the cycle. You're not one of those companies that will just go work with any craft brewer who doesn't really care, but it's more you want to see the whole system support the
Yeah.
sustainability aspect.
Yeah. And I'll say, again, I come from the farming, legacy. So I was never going to cut them out. In fact, I went at it is I want to sit down with them and I
Yeah.
want to Farmer Dale at Tattersall, right? Like what does he need help with? How can I help? And what I found out was they all want to do new innovations around different crops. They
Mm.
all want to try new regenerative agriculture practices. They all want to have biodiversity, they just need help to do it.
Yeah.
And so when you look at Farmer Dale and he grows this amazing organic corn, which by the way, if you get a chance to get a corn flour mix from NetZRO on Etsy, it's going to come out pretty quick here. You taste it and you're like, yeah, that guy rocks.
That's awesome.
Unbelievable. And so he said, if you can take my corn and move it forward and let even more people have access, he said, it just lit him up, right? He's like, that's
Oh,
what I want to do. And he said, then I can grow more or different crops. He said, that's what I want to do.
yeah.
And I realized for those types of farmers, it means a lot for them to feel like that great solid grain is going forward. So I really got into it, and so that's what I'm doing a lot of work now with the National Craft Maltsters Guild. So they are all about sustainable grains and malting sustainable grains, and
Wow.
they certify their grains. So, and then they sell those grains to brewers and distillers who want that kind of grain, right? So I was like, well, I'm going to process the spent grain from those breweries and distilleries because that's the grain I want to push forward.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so we're working with them to get that certification passed all the way through to the spent grain, right? So that as a consumer, you can say, I can have this spent grain that was certified through the maltsters, guild, right? And I'm assured that that's probably Farmer Dale's. You're going to see upcycled spent grain products, but they're not going to all be that kind of grain. Right?
No. No, and if we really want to make systemic change, you do have to care about every aspect of the process because just like if I'm promoting socially just clothes, but I still go shop at Target, I'm not actually completing the cycle of what I believe. And so I think it's really cool that you've stuck to your guns and also you're enabling these farmers to have a voice because I think in the farming world, it's still just kind of up and coming that people are switching over to organic or using different practices or want more diversity. That's not normal in the Midwest. And so to give them a voice and an outlet to where they can see that they are valued just helps the cycle continue.
And that's where real change is. You're absolutely correct, right? It's in that whole connection of that system that changes it. Otherwise, it's not going to change. And then, the whole idea with the George Floyd, realizing that social and racial justice is tied to food,
Yep.
tied to health. It isn't just changing one aspect of those injustices. It really has to be together. And food is it. Like, we all know that we're in food and we're like, the better people eat, the better our food system, the better those other injustices, come to light and are solved.
Yep.
So we're excited to be part of that. One of the groups that really got me thinking about all the connections was the Artisan Grain Collaborative. Alyssa Hartman, she's a director, and it's anywhere in the grain shed in the upper Midwest. So you have all of the people along that grain supply chain involved. And it's just how she's looked at it from the social aspect and the racial aspect and diversity and the justice that needs to happen there. I got to give her an A+, and I'm like kneeling to her. But and it's not easy. She gets pushback here in the Midwest. They look at her like, and they don't understand why she's addressing these things when it's just grain, right? And I, have to give her, wow, she's got courage and resilience. But again, that's what it needs. you
Yeah.
know.
And we kind of live in a compartmentalized culture where we don't realize all of these connections and how the better you eat, the more your brain can function and the more you can actually show up to work or show up for your family. And so it is all connected. And so I think that's part of the message for us even too, is when we are creating and preserving this environment, preserving our health, preserving so many things, it will affect our culture. We'll see a shift. So
Mm-hmm.
we look forward to that too.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm doing it. That's what gets me up every day. Every day there's challenges, but you have to have a reason to get up, and that is a great one. So I'm
Yeah.
sticking with that.
That's so cool. So tell us a little bit too about the eggs. I think the collagen thing is intriguing because it gives a vegetarian option for collagen, but
Yeah,
also just, I mean, if I look at my dozen eggs, I have a tiny, tiny bit of membranes, but
and
you're kind of
everyone.
working with Cargill and those kind of places. So you have a ton of those. So what would it look like to get that into consumers' hands through products or through another one of your
So
outlets?
yeah, I think what's going to ultimately bring this to light is the upcycled food movement.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was when I started in 2015. I wasn't an upcycler. I was basically a poop girl trying to do food. But that has evolved, and there's been numerous, a handful of us across the country who've been doing upcycling, didn't label it that. And then we got together and we said, this is a movement. Movements are great. Change comes with, systems.
Yeah.
The system has to change. The people have to be around it. There has to be an industry, right? Not just a movement. So we created a trade association last October. It was announced at ReFed. ReFed supported us, Harvard, NRDC. I mean, it's just been a whirlwind. So there was 8 of us that started it as founding board members of this trade association and a foundation. And we have over 100 members today in less than a
Nice.
year
That's
across the country
amazing.
and the world, right? I mean, huge companies, coming and going, oh my gosh, they've defined upcycled food, which we
That's
did.
so cool.
Yeah, and then now we're doing a upcycled food certification, right? So instead of just non-GMO, fair trade, organic, you're going to see upcycled food. Right?
Wow.
And that's a big endeavor. It takes, third-party people are creating it for us because we can't just do it ourselves. We have to have a third party do it if consumers are going to trust us, right? So
Yep.
have to do all that. But long story short, so anything like eggshells and calcium and collagen coming from eggshell waste, if you can label it upcycled, so it's ensured that it's safe and it's been researched, and then the demand and the products have been, food science people are behind it developing products, then it becomes real, right? Then a consumer can say, wow, I'm going to look for those products that have that collagen in it
Yep.
because it was upcycled and it's the best collagen. You are right in your thinking, because if collagen can come from bovines, which is animal parts, which is pretty common, and they can grow collagen, so they grow vegetables to make collagen. Well, that's hard on Mother Nature. I'm sorry, but that is. Mother Nature made these beautiful eggshells that have the collagen. Let's use those first. And the membrane in an eggshell is closest to the human placenta, which makes sense, right? Got a baby chicken there, it does the same thing.
Yeah.
That type of collagen is regenerative. And hence when you hear people go, oh my gosh, like I think you can put that on your face, right? That's yeah, actually that's the type of collagen it is.
Wow.
So it's got all your amino acids. It's just really hard to get off
Yeah.
a shell.
Yeah.
Right? And so people haven't had access to it just purely because it's a hard thing to do. If you go into a vitamin store, you're going to see collagen. You can look and it'll say bovine, it'll say vegetable. About 10% of it will say EFM, eggshell membrane, and there's actually a trademark. There's one company that does most of that work. We worked with them for a 2-year period of time to try to figure out, can we meet the specs with our technology, since we can do so much of it so fast.
Yep.
Yes, we can. So they helped us do that. And then now it's how do we put it in human food? Because nutraceuticals is a different set of regulatory requirements than human food. Human food like times 10 is a nutraceutical. And then also animal food, companion pet food. because all of that collagen can go into those, companion pets too. We love our pets should be able to have collagen. Right? So we've been doing all that work. It just takes a while to meet those requirements. Unlike spent grain, which people have been making food and dog treats from it, that's
Yep.
not, the runway was super easy for us. We're like, turn the machine on and do some testing for a couple months and we can do it. So that was a little easier. The difficulty is the volumes, like eggshells, like how do you get all that to market?
Yeah.
So we're figuring those things out, but for the most part, grain is grain. You just dry it and then you mill it and you do some typical things with it. Pretty easy. But I'm really excited about the collagen because I have a upcycling friend. Her company is amazing, Matriarch Foods in New York. And she's been upcycling vegetable parts. So anything that's left over from large manufacturing, right? And then she makes this vegetable broth and she wants to put the collagen in it.
Wow. So
Right?
you'll have a protein vegetable broth.
Oh, it's going to be so great.
Amazing.
Game changing. And she does a lot of upcycled vegetable broth. So this isn't a small operation. She's done really well. So that would be the perfect partner for me to introduce that, because vegetable broth can go into so many things.
Yes.
It's like putting the ticket on this train that's going to go push. So we're doing a pilot together. So we're hoping, sometime second quarter next year, we'll be able to show some things with that.
Well, that is very exciting. And I just have vegetarian friends too who are always looking for ways to add protein in. And this time of year when it's starting to get colder, that is going to be amazing. And you won't have to load up with so many beans if you're getting sick of them or trying to figure out all these little ways to add protein, but it'll just make it nice and easy and you'll get the same benefits of drinking bone broth from drinking a vegetable broth. So that's amazing.
Right.
Oh, I love that.
And you're like, hey, I'm saving the world.
Yes. I thought you were going on this train. I was looking into your fruit and vegetable waste section too, and that is intriguing to me because that's one of the reasons I don't love juicing is you have all that pulp left over. And I know people have made, like, you can dry it and you can use it in recipes and stuff. But getting a nutritious and like usable product out of juiced vegetable pulp and even just the peels and stuff that we tend to throw away, that's amazing. And that one's a little bit newer of a project, right?
Yeah, in fact, I have another upcycling friend. We have all kinds of upcycling friends. Pulp Pantry is one to watch.
Cool.
So yeah, type them. They're great women, great group. So what I do at NetZRO, really, I'm the only one that focuses on the commercialization of technology that can do scale, right? So you have people like Matriarch Foods and you have people like Pulp Pantry who get a lot of demand. All of a sudden people are like, we want that. Yeah. Now they have to go back and say, oh my gosh, we got to make so much more, right?
Yeah.
And then that becomes their problem. Their problem is we don't know how to process that much.
Yep.
That's when we come in and we say, we will help you because we can do 500 pounds an hour without blinking. That's not hard. For them, it's really hard because they started on the product first to the consumer, got demand, and now they got to go back and go, wow, we got to like redo this to get 5 times as much, right? Yeah. So that's our sweet spot, is how do we enable those who are out there with these cool products? How can we assist to do even more? And it's a quieter play because I don't have labels in front of the consumer, but in the back of the label, you'll see me in the back. Which is fine, because that's what we want to do. We want to be behind them, pushing them and creating more impact.
Yeah, that's amazing to play a part too in that, because I think obviously we can all do amazing things in our home kitchen or from a small commercial kitchen, but when things start catching steam, it would be really hard and tireless to be making that all day, every day.
Right.
So that's a really good step to have and be involved in. And you'll be involved in so many new creative initiatives because they don't all have to come from like one brain. It's all these people all over with all these ideas of upcycling that you get to hear about and partner in.
Right. And again, back to that's how we solve these terrible challenges we're faced with because it takes all of us, not just one brain. It takes all kinds of to 40 billion pounds of food waste.
Yeah. Well, I think you guys cited something that talked about how 40% of the food waste is post-production, and it's so silly because we have a hand in that. And I know in my own life, yes, things in my fridge go bad, and so it's figuring out how to partner with companies, but also in our own lives, figuring out how things are actually more useful than we think they are. And these
Right.
companies give a lot of inspiration to that too.
Yeah, and that's why I feel at NetZRO we have to be connected to all those people that have solutions on different aspects of it, right? Because what I don't want to do is get into a food manufacturing plant and then they decide, okay, we'll make even more food so we can upcycle it. No, 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 actually reduce it first. Don't
Yeah,
make more to make more upcycled food. That
yeah.
doesn't make sense. You know?
And you guys
Um,
also do a lot to work with companies who are making excess to connect them in the community, correct? So you're even tackling that issue.
Yep, yep. And there are a lot of people out there that actually have distribution for those things already.
Yep.
It's just plugging into them, quite frankly. You know,
Yeah. And having someone to
make
connect.
more food and less waste. I just got off the phone with her and she's in Detroit. She's done amazing diversion projects, like to make sure the food, just knowing her
Yeah.
makes it just her and I connecting because she's like, oh my gosh, I need to know you and I need to know you. Right? Yeah, it's really cool.
That's amazing because again, it's tackling different parts of the sustainability issue. It's not just focusing on one part. And while your business has a big role to these other companies in one section, you're also working so hard in Minnesota to provide little bridges in the other sections of the sustainability issue. And I just think that's really admirable. And you guys also donate quite a bit of your profits to back into the sustainable regenerative food system idea.
Yep, and that's we chose a B Corp for that reason. When you're a visionary and an entrepreneur, you start a company, you know, it over time as it grows and you get funding and more people are involved, that can be lost, right?
Yep.
So we said, okay, we're going to be a B Corp, and this is what our mission is, right? And it can't change. People can't come in and change that. You know, we are going to give back to the community in these following ways, right? We have enough. We're processing enough food, so
Yeah.
why would you not say, hey, 10% of the grain's going to go to neighbor loaves, and those loaves of bread are getting baked and given away, right?
Yeah.
To me, if you do it on the onset, it's easier than if years later, once you're making good money, then you try to do something nice and good to the community. It's harder to do it that way. Just
Yep.
build it in.
Yeah. Does it feel like most of your team has been on board with that?
My team, yes, investors, no.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, you always have to hit roadblocks, right?
Slow, but it's getting there.
Yeah. What would you say the biggest roadblocks as a company have been for you?
I would say being a female, you know, it's
Hmm.
still is female or any kind of or BIPOC or any business owners that are different than the ones that have the money.
Yeah.
It's difficult. It's there's still bias there all the time. Stats don't lie. You know, women get less money for the
Hmm.
investing and the growth, right? So it continues to be a challenge, you know, and as I'm getting more people involved in our company, more investors, then it will take on a new life.
Yep.
But I'm not, I'm, I'm in my middle 50s. I never thought I would be sitting here going, women still don't get their fair share. It is
Yeah.
mind boggling, really. And I have daughters, so yeah, I'm gonna fight the fight. You know, it's like,
Yep.
okay, I'm gonna keep doing it. I didn't think I'd be fighting for that, but I'm gonna fight for that too.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'm committed to keep doing that. So
That's amazing. That is an aspect of like a lot of businesses and a lot of corporations that on the ground level we can't see, and you hear stories, but it would be different to be in your shoes and have to go to investor meetings or talk to people and say, yes, I am the founder, I am the CEO, and just overcome those hurdles that you think that people might have biases coming into a conversation with you about.
Yeah, it's especially with what I do because it's like, oh, look, you're selling flour. It must be at the farmer's market. No, we're talking
Oh,
10 tons a day. That's not a farmer's market play.
yeah. Well, and you're working with a lot of distilleries and breweries, which like we all picture this like macho bearded flanneled man as those that kind of business. And so it's probably interesting saying, yes, I work with spent grain from these really great craft breweries. It's just you
Yeah,
have
that's why I wear the flannel like I went on today.
It's good that you're not growing a beard though. I think that that's nice.
I tried during COVID. I don't know what happened. But I will say in the brewing distilling world, there are a lot of women starting these and really doing well as breweries and distilleries. So keep your eyes open because there are some that are, now is the time. What's going to happen is the industry is going to consolidate because of COVID really fast.
Yeah.
It was already consolidating because there were so many.
Yeah.
And I believe the women are going to be left standing there, great, innovative, tough, resilient, customer oriented, so we're going to see some positive stuff in the next couple of years.
That's good to hear. And it's really good because as much as we all can say that we want to look at the world with different eyes, we still have these like assumptions and prejudices. So to see the women being resilient in those businesses too will be really amazing.
Yep, and farmers too. There's some
Yes.
amazing women who are farming right now, and I'm like, go.
Yeah, around here we have quite a few really amazing local women farmers. And so I think that that has already helped shift my brain, especially with local meats. I think that that's been incredible to see some women so passionate about pasture-raised pig farming. It's so cool because like it's just such a stereotype that it's a man in overalls in a confinement barn, and they're breaking all these molds.
It's fun to watch.
Yeah. um just to end here, what would you say is the best way for us as normal people and consumers to be involved in the upcycled food movement and in net zero?
Keep doing what we've been doing since COVID, which was a blessing. Start asking questions about your food. When we were all disrupted and all of a sudden you can't get things, you start going, well, why?
Yeah.
And then it's, well, where does it come from? Wow, I had no idea, right? I love these conversations.
Me too.
Keep it up and keep asking why and where and who's the farmer, like you said with Tattersall, and looking it up and wanting to know more, because that all helps the cause is
Yeah.
to keep it local and keep that energy around it and the support. Because what happens is, as small businesses are struggling now, and we're going to lose a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
The big commercial chains, the big food companies will be fine. They're going to be fine. So it's really important right now for us to really get together and support local and really more so than we ever thought, and keep baking and cooking at home. Love it.
Yes. I agree. And then we can start to use innovative products like the vegetable broth with eggshell collagen when that starts coming out too.
Exactly. And those are the conversations over the dinner table, and that's great.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Sue. This has been really good. And I was not aware how many things you were involved in. And so I think that helped me kind of realize that you guys really have a hand in a lot of the upcycled food movement. And I think it's definitely on the cusp of being quite unstoppable.
Just wait, get along on the ride.
It's so cool. There's a website, I think it's on your website. It's the Upcycled Food Movement. That's the one that's going to be certifying things, right?
Upcycledfood.org.
Okay, that's it.
Yep.
So that I saw there was a list of some really good resources too if people want to support upcycled businesses.
Absolutely. We keep that list up to date all the time, and it's growing. So definitely, I hope your audience goes out and checks it out and support them. Yep.
Well, thank you again. This has been awesome.
Thank you, Marissa.
I have no other words.
Have a great weekend. Think
You
upcycled.
too.
All right.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for joining us in our conversation with Sue Marshall. She's quite a go-getter, and that was really a great conversation. So I hope that you find ways to get involved in the upcycled food movement and just learn that this is a way not only to preserve our environment, but also to preserve our communities through just supporting those in need. A lot of cool companies are involved in upcycling food, and the more we can support them, the more we can support each other and ultimately get this to gain some more headway. So thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing how you all use the information shared.